thought I had finally found love. The kind that makes you feel alive. The kind that changes everything. But what I didn't realize was that I was walking straight into a storm. He was charming, kind, and everything I had ever wanted. Except for one thing. He wasn't mine to love. What started as stolen glances and innocent conversations quickly turned into something I couldn't control, something forbidden. I told myself we were just caught in something bigger than us, that love like this couldn't be wrong. But love built on betrayal doesn't lead to happy endings. I ignored the warnings. I ignored my own guilt. And by the time I realized what I had done, it was too late. His marriage was falling apart. My reputation was in ruins. And the man I had risked everything for? He was slipping away. Now, as I stand in the wreckage of the life I destroyed, I have only one question left. Was it ever real, or was I just another mistake? Falling for the wrong man. I never set out to ruin a family. I never wanted to be the other woman, the one whispered about in hushed voices, the one whose name became synonymous with betrayal. But love doesn't always ask for permission. And sometimes the heart wants what it shouldn't. The first time I saw him, it started at the most unexpected place, a parent-teacher meeting. I was a second-grade teacher, living a quiet, predictable life. The kind of life where nothing truly exciting ever happened. Then he walked in, tall, handsome, a little lost but charming in the way single dads often are. I had seen him before, heard whispers from the other teachers about the hot single father in room 203. But the moment our eyes met, something shifted inside me. I told myself it was nothing, just admiration, curiosity. But deep down, I already knew. It was the beginning of the end, a man who wasn't mine to love. His name was Daniel, a devoted father, completely unaware of how dangerous he was to me. At first, our conversations were casual. He asked about his son's progress. I answered, simple, innocent. But then, it changed. The way he lingered after meetings, the way his eyes softened when he looked at me, the way my heart betrayed me every time he smiled. I wasn't stupid. I knew he was off limits. He had a wife, a family, and I had a conscience. But love doesn't wait for logic. It creeps in slowly, weaving itself into places it doesn't belong. And by the time you realize you're falling, it's too late. The night, everything changed. I still remember the night that sealed my fate. It was after a school event, and Daniel had offered to help me clean up. We were alone in the classroom, the world outside quiet and dark. He reached for a stack of papers at the same time I did. Our fingers brushed, and suddenly, there was nothing casual about it anymore. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. The air shifted, thick with something we couldn't name, but both understood. I should go, he murmured. But he didn't move. I could feel his hesitation. And that's when I made the biggest mistake of my life. I looked up at him, really looked at him, and he saw it. All of it. The longing, the fear, the reckless, dangerous truth I had tried so hard to hide. His jaw tightened, his breath was unsteady. "Tell me to leave," he whispered. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because I didn't want him to leave. I wanted him to stay, and in that single moment, we crossed a line we could never uncross. A love that wasn't ours to have. That night changed everything. We didn't kiss, we didn't touch. But the damage was already done. Because from that moment forward, we were no longer just two people making polite conversation. We were something else. Something dangerous, something that would destroy everything in its path. And as much as I tried to stop it, I knew, deep down, I didn't want to. The line we shouldn't have crossed. Some mistakes happen in an instant. Others happen slowly, one stolen glance, one unspoken thought at a time, until you wake up one day and realize you've gone too far to turn back. That's what loving Daniel felt like. A slow, beautiful, inevitable disaster. The first lie. After that night in the classroom, I told myself it was nothing. I convinced myself that if we just ignored it, the feelings would fade. But that was a lie. Because ignoring it didn't make it go away. It only made it stronger. Every time I saw him, my heart betrayed me. Every time he looked at me, his eyes asked questions we couldn't answer. Every time he lingered after meetings, I felt myself slipping deeper into something dangerous. And then one day, I stopped trying to fight it. The text that changed everything. It was late. I was sitting in bed, staring at my phone, trying not to think about him. Then it lit up. Daniel, can't sleep, thinking about you. My heart stopped. For a moment, I considered not responding. But I did, because deep down, I wanted this. Me too. And that was it. The first lie, the first small betrayal. The first step into a world I couldn't escape. The secret meetings. We were careful at first. Quick conversations in the hallway. Accidental touches that weren't really accidental. A game of how close can we get before it becomes real. But secrets have a way of growing. One night he asked me to meet him. Just to talk, he said. I knew it was a bad idea, but I went anyway. We sat in his car, parked in a quiet spot by the lake. At first, we really did just talk. He told me about his life, about his marriage, how it had turned into two strangers living under the same roof. And I told him about mine, how I had spent so much time waiting for love that I had stopped believing it would ever find me. He reached for my hand. This isn't fair, he whispered. I nodded, but I didn't let go. Because fair or not, this was the realest thing I had ever felt. The first kiss. I don't know who leaned in first. All I know is that one moment we were talking, and the next, his lips were on mine. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was slow, deep, and dangerous. The kind of kiss that rewrites everything you thought you knew about love. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the ring on his finger, not the life waiting for him back home, not the fact that this would ruin us both. Because for the first time in my life, I felt alive. The consequences begin. The next morning, reality hit me like a wrecking ball. I woke up with his taste still on my lips, his voice still in my head, and the sickening realization that I had just destroyed the life I worked so hard to build. I wasn't just in love with a married man. I was sleepwalking into a disaster that would break more than just my own heart. But the scariest part, I didn't want to stop. Because loving him felt too good, and I was already too far gone. Loving him was like standing on the edge of a cliff. I knew that one wrong step would send me crashing down, that eventually everything would fall apart. But I didn't stop, because when we were together, the world felt smaller, quieter, safer, and I was too addicted to him to walk away. The first regret. The morning after our kiss, I stared at myself in the mirror. I didn't look different, but I felt different, like I had stepped into a version of myself I didn't recognize. I had spent my whole life believing I was a good person. But good people don't do this. Good people don't steal kisses from married men. Good people don't betray other women. I told myself I would end it. That the next time I saw Daniel, I would walk away. But when he showed up at my classroom door that afternoon, I knew I was lying to myself. The world starts to notice. People started talking. The whispers in the teacher's lounge grew louder. Have you noticed how much time Daniel spends at the school? It's sweet, but a little excessive, don't you think? I pretended not to hear them, but deep down I knew. We weren't as careful as we thought, and someone was watching us. His wife's warning. One evening, I was walking to my car when I heard my name. I turned, and there she was, Daniel's wife. She stood under the glow of a street lamp, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. My heart stopped. "I don't know what's going on between you and my husband," she said, her voice calm. "But I'm telling you, whatever it is, end it now." I opened my mouth to speak, but what was I supposed to say? "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I love him," because no matter how I framed it, I was still the villain in her story. A love that felt like war. That night I met Daniel at our usual spot, a quiet park by the lake. I told him about his wife's warning. I expected him to panic. But instead, he just sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She already knows," he murmured. My stomach dropped. "What?" He looked at me then. Really looked at me. "I think she's known for a while. She just didn't want to believe it." Guilt clawed at my chest. This wasn't just a secret anymore. This was a wound, one we had sliced open, and now it was bleeding into every part of our lives. "So what now?" I whispered. Daniel exhaled, his fingers brushing against mine. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know I don't want to lose you." And just like that, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this love was worth the destruction it was causing, even though deep down, I knew. We were running out of time. Some love stories end in happily ever after. Others, they burn everything in their path, and I was about to find out which one ours would be. The guilt that wouldn't let me go. After Daniel admitted that his wife already knew, something inside me shifted. I thought I could pretend this wasn't real, that we were just two people caught in something bigger than us. But this wasn't just about love anymore. It was about betrayal. And no matter how much I loved him, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were destroying something we could never rebuild. The night she found out everything, it happened on a Friday night. Daniel and I were at a small cafe, tucked into a quiet corner, stealing a moment that was never ours to take. Then his phone buzzed. Incoming call. "Wife." He let it ring. Then another, and another. I shifted uncomfortably. Something was wrong. Then my own phone vibrated. A text. From an unknown number. "I know where you are." My blood ran cold. I looked up at Daniel, my hands shaking. "We have to go," I whispered. But we were too late, because when we stepped outside, she was waiting for us, the confrontation. She stood there, arms crossed, eyes filled with something worse than anger. Disgust. I felt my heart pound against my ribs as she stepped forward, her gaze locked on Daniel. "Tell me the truth," she demanded, her voice shaking. Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. So I answered for him. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Her head snapped toward me. "Sorry," she repeated, her voice dripping with betrayal. "You think that fixes this?" I didn't know what to say, because nothing could fix this. We had taken something sacred, a marriage, a family, and tore it apart. "The breaking point," Daniel finally spoke. "I never meant to hurt you." His wife let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't just hurt me, Daniel. You destroyed us." Then she turned to me. "And you? Was it worth it?" I couldn't answer, because I didn't know anymore. Before I could say anything, she threw something at him. His wedding ring. It hit the ground between us, a symbol of everything we had ruined. "You can have him," she spat. "He was never mine anyway." Then she walked away, and just like that, it was over. A love that cost too much. Daniel turned to me. his face pale. "We can be together now," he murmured. But I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel happiness. I felt empty because in that moment, I realized we had nothing left except the wreckage we had created. And for the first time, I wondered, love wasn't supposed to feel like this. It wasn't supposed to feel like guilt, like shame, like watching a life crumble before your eyes. But that's exactly what it felt like. And now there was no turning back. The morning after the storm, I woke up feeling suffocated, not by the walls around me, but by the choices I had made. Daniel's wife was gone, but her words still echoed in my mind. Was it worth it? I had spent so long chasing him, believing that what we had was worth any cost. But now, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized I wasn't so sure anymore. The world knows. People talked. Of course they did. The whispers at school turned into stares. Co-workers avoided me. Mothers looked at me with thinly veiled judgment as they picked up their kids. I was no longer just a teacher. I was the woman who broke a family apart. The homewrecker. The other woman. And no matter how much Daniel told me he loved me, no matter how many times he promised that we would make this work, I couldn't escape the truth. I had ruined my reputation. And for what? A love that suddenly didn't feel so certain anymore. Daniel wasn't the same. At first he was sweet, attentive, loving. He told me I was everything to him, that this was our chance to finally be happy. But happiness doesn't come from hurting other people. And slowly, things started to change. His texts became less frequent. He canceled plans last minute. He was distracted, distant, like a man who wasn't sure he had made the right choice. And that terrified me because I had given up everything for him. What if he wasn't mine to keep? The first real fight. It happened on a Saturday night. We were supposed to go to dinner, but he called, voice tired. "I don't think I can make it tonight." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Again?" A pause. Too long. "Yeah, just a lot going on." I clenched my fists. Is it her? Another silence. Then softly, "She wants to talk." My heart stopped. Why? Because we have a child together. Because this isn't just about us. Tears burned my eyes. And what am I supposed to do? My voice cracked. Sit here and wait for you to figure out what you want? "You knew this wouldn't be easy," he said. "I didn't think I'd be fighting for you." Daniel exhaled heavily. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed bitterly. "None of this is fair, Daniel. I lost my job, my friends, my life. And now you're telling me you're still talking to her?" I expected him to say something, to tell me he wasn't having second thoughts. But all he said was, "I need time." The moment I knew it was over, I stared at my reflection in the mirror that night. I looked tired, drained, like a woman who had given too much and was left with nothing in return. Daniel had promised me forever, but in the end, I was just a chapter in his messy, complicated love story. And suddenly, I realized I didn't want to wait for him anymore, because maybe I had already lost him. People say love is worth fighting for. But what happens when you're the only one fighting? What happens when the love you risked everything for isn't enough to save you? The beginning of the end. Daniel didn't call the next day, or the day after that. The silence stretched longer and longer until I realized I was waiting for a man who had already left me behind. And the worst part? I had nowhere to go. I had lost my job, my friends, the respect of everyone around me, all because I believed in a love that was never really mine. And now I was paying the price, the final goodbye. A week passed before I saw him again. I told him to meet me at the park, the same place where we had once confessed our feelings. Now it was where I was going to let him go. He sat down next to me, his expression heavy. "I didn't want this to hurt you," he murmured. I let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't want it to hurt me? Daniel, I gave up everything for you, and now you're... what? Reconsidering?" He looked away. "I didn't expect it to be this hard," he admitted. I swallowed the pain rising in my throat. "So, what are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "She wants to try again," he said finally. I felt my chest tighten. "And you?" He met my eyes. "I don't know. That was it." That was the moment I knew. I had lost, and I had never really stood a chance. Walking away, I didn't beg, I didn't cry. I just stood up, feeling numb. "I hope she takes you back," I said. Daniel's eyes widened, like he hadn't expected me to just let him go. "I didn't mean for it to end like this," he whispered. I forced a sad smile. "Neither did I." Then I turned and walked away. And for the first time in months, I wasn't walking toward him. I was walking toward myself, finding myself again. The days passed slowly, the whispers faded. The judgmental stares became less frequent, and one day I woke up and realized I had survived. I had lost everything I thought I wanted. But maybe that was the only way to find what I truly needed. The real love story. Daniel wasn't my happily ever after. He was a lesson, a reminder that love should never come at the cost of yourself. And as I stood by the window, watching the sunrise of a new day, I whispered the words I wished I had known all along. I deserve more than this. Because in the end, this wasn't a love story about him. It was a love story about me. The end.